At the last election, David Cameron said, vote blue, go green. Will that still be your pitch at the next election?
Well, absolutely. I think we've had some tremendous achievements on the environment over the last Parliament. We've seen a reduction in our carbon emissions, but the environment is more than just about carbon. We've also seen improvement in our water quality. We've seen a record number of trees growing in this country, more than for 700 years. We've seen more woodland coverage, improvements in our habitats, and I think we are making real progress on the environment.
Do you agree with your predecessor, Owen Paterson, who claims that there is, quote, a green blob of unelected busybodies profiting handsomely from promoting the green agenda?
I think the issue with the environment debate is quite often it's been something that experts have been engaged in rather than the general public. And one of the things I want to do as Environment Secretary is open up that debate, because it's important to all of us, whether we have clean water to drink, whether we have air to breathe, when we go to the beach at the weekend.
Is there a green blob?
I wouldn't use that word to describe it, but I think we do have a debate where there are a lot of experts active in it. And what I think we need to do is bring it back to what are the practical differences we're making.
You think it's been captured by do you think it's been captured by the environmental lobby?
I wouldn't say that. What I would say is the public are very, very interested in environmental issues. They're interested in trees, in forestry, interested in bees, interested in water quality. And what we have to do is communicate the real changes we're making and the policies we're pursuing.
Do you believe, as Mr. Patterson has said, that the forecast effects of climate change have been consistently and widely exaggerated?
What I would say is that we are seeing warming taking place. We know that human beings have contributed to that.
He's not arguing about that. What he's saying is that the forecast effects of it have been consistently and widely exaggerated. Do you agree?
Well, there is no perfect forecast, because as we learn more, as we have better scientific evidence, we always improve forecasts. It's just like economic forecasts, Andrew. No forecast is perfect.
No, I'm not. He's not saying they're perfect. He's saying they've been consistently and widely exaggerated. He talks about forecasts of the Gulf Stream coming to a stop, the worsening of hurricanes, the retreat of Antarctic sea ice, the increase in malaria, 50 million climate refugees by now. He says that was all forecast and none of it has happened. Do you agree?
Well, I think we have seen warming taking place.
That's not what I'm asking you.
If you look at last winter, we had the wettest winter on record in this country. We saw extraordinary flooding events.
Was that because of climate change?
Well, I think that did play a part. And we
don't. So he's wrong to say that
we don't know exactly. But my job, Andrew.
Oh, we don't.
My job, Andrew, as Environment Secretary, is to make sure we adapt to those challenges.
But
it's not to predict it. Is to make sure that we have the flood preparations in place so that we can deal with those challenges as they come.
Has there been scaremongering? Have these forecasts been consistently and widely exaggerated?
What I would say is no forecast is perfect. But
That's
we do know warming is taking place.
Well, you say warming is taking place. Do you think it's significant that average global temperatures have not increased for 18 years?
Well, what we're seeing more erratic weather patterns. And as I've been clear, my job as Environment Secretary is to make sure we adapt to those weather patterns. We've seen them taking place in Britain. And
forgive me, Minister, scientists are divided on whether the erratic weather patterns are linked to climate change. There's a huge debate in the scientific community about that. But I didn't ask you about that. What I asked you was, is it significant that average global temperatures have not increased for 18 years?
I think we do know that warming is taking place overall.
No one's arguing about that.
And I think
but for the past 18 years, scientists tell us they haven't. Now, I'm asking you a simple question. Is it or is it not significant?
I mean, I've had discussions with our Chief Scientific Advisor, the government's Chief Scientific Advisor, and they are very clear that there is warming taking place.
You've said that 5 times, and I'm not arguing about that. I'm asking you is, by both satellite and land temperature measurements, we've not seen an increase for 18 years. Most scientists agree with that. They don't agree on why. I'm asking you, is it significant or not? I'll try one more time.
What I'm saying is that is something that I receive advice from scientific experts on. My role as Environment Secretary is to make sure we respond to those challenges and those changes. And I think if you ask a member of the British public about the weather we saw last year, the impact on our livelihoods of events like flooding, what they want is an Environment Secretary who's making sure we've got adequate preparations in place.
Now, the government has a legally binding target, which it inherited from the last government, and which it voted for in opposition, to cut carbon emissions by 80% of 1990 levels by 2050. That's a legally binding target. 80% less than the carbon we produced in 1990. It's a huge, huge cut. Do you accept that that will involve the complete decarbonisation of electricity generation?
What I would say is we've already achieved 30% of that reduction since 1990. So already well on the way to the target. And what's important...
But I didn't ask you about that. I asked you, do you accept it will involve the complete decarbonisation of electricity generation?
Well, it will obviously result in decarbonisation, but there are many different ways in which we can achieve that.
Currently, our electricity generation depends on 60% fossil fuel generation. Under this legally binding target, all that will have to go, correct?
Well, that's a matter for the Department of Energy and Climate Change. What I would say...
But we're doing this for environmental reasons, and we're doing this for your department's reasons. So you accept that no electricity can be generated by fossil fuels to hit this target?
I don't accept that because it's an 80% reduction.
But
what I would say is that I used to work in the oil and gas industry. The reality is we've only got a limited amount of fossil fuels. We do need to find new sources of energy. We're seeing technology develop all the time, new forms of technology to deal with those challenges. And what's really important about the new target that the Prime Minister has agreed is it's technology neutral. So we can use all kinds of different ways of solving that, whether it's nuclear power, whether it's gas-fired, which has a lower carbon emission than coal-fired power stations, whether it's solar, whether it's wind power. We can use all of those different technologies. So it's very flexible. What we don't know, Andrew, from where we're sitting now, is what technologies are going to be developed in the next 10 years, the next 20 years.
But Minister,
what we're doing is creating a level playing field.
What we do know is that you're under a legally binding obligation to cut carbon emissions by 80% by 2050. Do you accept that that could only be done by abolishing gas for heating and cooking in the home?
Well, gas is going to run out anyway over the period of the next
the world's awash in gas.
years.
Gas prices are plummeting. Do you accept that to meet this legally binding target, we will no longer be able to use gas for heating and cooking in the home?
Well, what I would say is we need to get to that target gradually, and that's what we're doing. But gas has half the emissions of coal, so it is part of our medium-term plan to deal with that. Yes, but if you look at the 2030 target, the 2030 target is a 40% cut. And we don't know, Andrew, in 10 years' time what technology is going to be available, how we utilise it.
Gas causes carbon less than coal, and you can't get an 80% cut unless you stop people using gas for heating.
But there are also options like